My name is Zethkar, and I am a soldier of the Vorthak Empire. For 300 cycles, our military has conquered 17 star systems without facing real resistance. We are tall, strong, and our technology is advanced. Our plasma rifles can melt through solid metal, and our armor can stop most weapons. We believed we were the ultimate warriors in the galaxy. Then we met the humans. Still remember the day our fleet received orders to invade a small planet called Earth. The intelligence reports made humans sound weak and primitive. They were smaller than us, had no natural armor, and their technology seemed basic compared to ours. Command told us this would be an easy victory. We would land, demonstrate our power, and the humans would surrender within days. How wrong we were. The first sign something was different came when we entered their solar system. Our sensors detected thousands of small objects floating in space around their planet. At first we thought they were asteroids or space debris. Our tactical officer, Krixtel, laughed and said humans were so primitive they couldn't even clean up their orbital space. Then those objects started moving toward us. What we had mistaken for debris were actually human spacecraft. They were tiny compared to our massive battleships, but there were so many of them. Like angry insects swarming around a giant beast, they buzzed around our fleet with incredible speed and agility. Our gunners tried to target them, but they moved in patterns that seemed impossible to predict. The first human ship that attacked us was no bigger than one of our escape pods. It flew straight at our flagship, completely ignoring the plasma fire we directed at it. Our weapons officer, Gorthman, was laughing as he tried to shoot it down. "Look at these crazy little creatures," he said. "They're going to ram us with that tiny ship." But the human ship didn't ram us. Instead, it released something small and fast, a projectile that our sensors barely detected. The next thing we knew, one of our main engines exploded. The explosion was so powerful it shook our entire ship. Emergency alarms started blaring and damage reports flooded in from all sections. "How is that possible?" our captain demanded. "That tiny projectile shouldn't have been able to penetrate our shields." Our science officer studied the readings with confusion. "Sir, it appears they used kinetic energy rather than plasma or energy weapons. The projectile was made of dense metal and traveling at enormous speed. It created what humans call a kinetic kill vehicle." While we were still trying to understand what had happened, more human ships attacked. They came from every direction, releasing these devastating kinetic projectiles. Our massive guns couldn't track their fast movements, and our shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against solid metal traveling at incredible speeds. Within minutes, 3 of our destroyers were crippled. The humans had somehow turned simple physics into a terrifying weapon. They didn't need exotic energy sources or advanced plasma technology. They just threw metal really, really fast. But that was only the beginning of our education about human warfare. The captain ordered our fleet to retreat to a safe distance and regroup. We needed time to analyze these new tactics and develop countermeasures. As we pulled back, our communications officer intercepted human radio transmissions. When we translated them, what we heard made no sense. The humans were laughing. Not just laughing, but making jokes about our retreat. One transmission said, "Did you see the big purple one spin around when we hit his engine?" "He looked like my kid's toy top." Another voice replied, "Yeah, for such advanced aliens, they sure don't know how to fight small targets." This confused us greatly. In Vorthak culture, warfare is serious and honorable. We approach battle with respect for our enemies and solemnity for the violence we must commit. But humans seem to treat deadly combat like some kind of game or entertainment. Our intelligence officer, Yextra, worked frantically to gather more information about human combat psychology. What she discovered disturbed us all. Humans, it seemed, had spent their entire evolution fighting each other. Their planet had no unified government, but was divided into hundreds of competing nations. They had been in almost constant warfare for thousands of years. "Sir," Yextra reported to the captain, "humans have developed over 600 different ways to kill each other. They have weapons specifically designed for every possible combat situation. Close range, long range, underwater, in space, in tunnels, in cities, in forests. They even have weapons designed to fight other weapons." The captain's facial plates shifted to show confusion. "But surely they must have peaceful periods. Times when they focus on art, science, or philosophy?" "They do, sir. But even during peaceful times, they continue developing new weapons and training for war. They call it preparation. and seem to believe that being ready for violence is the best way to maintain peace. This concept was alien to us. Vorthak society had been unified under one government for millennia. We fought other species for territory and resources, but we had never experienced the constant, grinding warfare that had shaped human evolution. We didn't understand that humans had learned to see violence and conflict from every possible angle. As we studied their transmissions further, we learned about human military history. They had fought wars with swords and arrows, then guns and cannons, then aircraft and tanks, then missiles and satellites. Each generation had faced deadlier enemies and had been forced to become more creative, more adaptable, more ruthless. The most disturbing discovery was that humans seemed to enjoy the challenge of fighting superior enemies. Their historical records were filled with stories of small human forces defeating much larger armies through cleverness, determination, and what they called thinking outside the box. Our psychological warfare expert, Nethgor, studied human combat motivation and reported something that chilled us all. "Sir, when faced with overwhelming odds, most species surrender or flee. Humans do the opposite. Desperate situations seem to make them more dangerous, not less. They have a saying, 'Cornered animals fight the hardest.'" As night fell on their planet below us, we watched thousands of lights across their surface. Each light represented a human settlement, and in each settlement were humans who had spent their entire species' history learning how to fight and kill. They had turned warfare into an art form, a science, and apparently a source of entertainment. I looked at my fellow soldiers and saw the same expression on their faces that I felt on my own. For the first time in our military careers, we were afraid, not just cautious or concerned, but genuinely afraid of our enemy, and we hadn't even landed on their planet yet. The next morning, our captain decided we needed to attempt ground operations despite our losses in space. High Command was demanding results, and retreating without even trying to land would be seen as cowardice. We selected what appeared to be a small human settlement for our first assault. Intelligence suggested it was a farming community with minimal military presence. Our invasion force consisted of 200 elite Vorthak warriors, armed with the finest weapons our empire could provide. Each of us wore power armor that could stop plasma fire and increase our strength threefold. Our rifles could punch holes through solid steel, and our tactical sensors could detect enemies from great distances. We had fought dozens of campaigns against various alien species and never suffered significant casualties. The landing zone was a flat area surrounded by human agricultural fields. As our dropships descended, I felt confident. These humans might be clever in space combat, but ground warfare was different. Here, size, strength, and superior equipment would determine the outcome. Our first mistake was assuming human farmers were not soldiers. We deployed in standard formation, with heavy weapons teams providing cover, while scout units advanced toward the human settlement. Everything seemed normal for the first few minutes. Our scanners detected human life signs in the area, but they appeared to be retreating deeper into their settlement, which was exactly what we expected from a primitive, peaceful population. Then the ground exploded beneath us. Private Korthvan, who had been walking point, simply vanished in a blast of dirt, metal, and flame. One moment he was there, the next moment there was only a smoking crater. Our medical officer rushed to help, but there was nothing left to treat. "Buried explosives," shouted Sergeant Vaxtel. "They mined the area. But how could farmers have military-grade explosives? And how did they know exactly where we would land?" These questions raced through my mind as more explosions erupted around us. The humans had somehow predicted our landing zone and prepared an elaborate trap. Our heavy weapons specialist, Grexamar, began firing his plasma cannon at the nearest human structures, trying to eliminate the source of the attack. The powerful energy blasts carved through human buildings like they were made of paper. But instead of stopping the explosions, this seemed to make them worse. More buried charges detonated, but now they were behind us, cutting off our retreat to the dropships. We were surrounded by an invisible enemy that had turned the very ground into a weapon. "Fall back to defensive positions," ordered Sergeant Vaxtel, but there were no defensive positions. The humans had chosen this battleground perfectly. The flat agricultural land offered no natural cover, and every piece of human-made structure was apparently designed to explode when damaged. That's when we learned about human guerrilla warfare. The first human we actually saw was a female, smaller than even the average member of their species. She appeared at the edge of our sensor range, carrying what looked like a primitive projectile weapon. Before our gunners could target her, she fired a single shot and disappeared back into cover. The shot struck our communications specialist, Yithkar, directly in the center of his helmet. Our power armor was designed to stop plasma blasts and energy weapons, but it couldn't handle the kinetic force of a high-velocity metal projectile. Yithkar dropped instantly, his communications equipment destroyed. "How did she penetrate our armor with such a primitive weapon?" demanded Sergeant Vaxtel. Our technical specialist examined Yithkar's helmet and found a perfectly round hole punched through both the front and back plates. "Sir, the projectile was traveling at tremendous velocity. The kinetic energy was concentrated into a very small point. Our armor can distribute energy weapon hits across its surface, but this created a focused impact that punched right through. More humans appeared at various points around our perimeter. Each one fired a single, precisely aimed shot, then vanished before we could return fire. They were using their knowledge of the local terrain to appear and disappear like ghosts. We could barely see them, but they seemed to know exactly where each of us was positioned. Our tactical doctrine called for advancing aggressively and using our superior firepower to overwhelm enemy positions. But how do you overwhelm an enemy you can't see? How do you advance when every step might trigger an explosion? The humans had somehow turned our advantages into disadvantages. Our heavy armor made us slow and easy to target. Our powerful weapons were useless against enemies that appeared for only seconds at a time. Our advanced sensors were designed to detect large military formations, not individual humans hiding in their own environment. After 30 minutes of this nightmare, we had lost 6 soldiers and achieved nothing. Every time we tried to advance, explosions forced us back. Every time we tried to establish a defensive perimeter, human snipers picked off our perimeter guards. We were being systematically destroyed by an enemy we rarely saw. Then the humans did something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They stopped fighting and started talking to us. A human voice came through our communication systems, speaking in perfectly clear Vorthak language. "Hello, purple soldiers. You look confused. Would you like some help understanding your situation?" Sergeant Vaxtel was so surprised he forgot military protocol. "How did you learn our language? How are you accessing our communications?" The human voice laughed. It was a pleasant, almost friendly sound. "We've been monitoring your transmission since you entered our solar system. Your language isn't that difficult to learn. We're quite good at languages. We have over 7,000 different languages just on our own planet." "What do you want?" demanded the sergeant. "We want you to leave," the voice replied. "But since you're here, we thought you might like to learn something about human warfare. You see, you made the mistake of thinking this was a military engagement. This isn't a battle between soldiers. This is pest control." The casual dismissal stung worse than our losses. This human was talking to elite Vorthak warriors like we were insects infesting their property. "You are facing farmers, mechanics, and shopkeepers," the voice continued. "The elderly man who just killed your heavy weapons specialist is 73 years old and repairs agricultural equipment for a living. The woman who destroyed your communications is a teacher at the local school. The explosives you've been walking into were built by children as part of their chemistry education. This couldn't be true. Farmers and teachers couldn't fight like this." "You're lying," shouted Sergeant Vaxtel. "Am I?" the voice asked. "Tell me, how many of your soldiers have you lost to our military? How many to our professional army?" We had lost 8 soldiers, but we hadn't seen a single human military uniform or professional military equipment. Everything had been improvised weapons, civilian clothing, and amateur tactics that somehow worked better than our professional military training. "You see," the human voice explained, "you're not fighting our army. You're fighting our civilians. Our actual military is still preparing. They're quite excited to meet you, but they want to finish their preparations first. They're very thorough. The implications of this hit us like a physical blow. If civilian farmers and teachers could inflict this level of damage on elite Vorthak soldiers, what would happen when we faced their actual military? Let me give you some free advice," the human voice continued. "Leave now. Go back to your ships and pretend this never happened. Because if you stay, if you force us to escalate this conflict, you're going to learn things about warfare that will give you nightmares for the rest of your very short lives. We are Vorthak warriors," Sergeant Vaxtel declared. "We do not retreat from farmers." "Okay," the human voice said. And there was something in that simple word that made my spine chill. Remember, you were warned. Then the real fighting began. The silence that followed the humans' warning lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then the ground beneath us erupted in a coordinated series of explosions that made the earlier attacks look like gentle fireworks. These weren't random mines scattered around the battlefield. This was a precisely planned demolition designed to reshape the entire area. The flat agricultural land we had chosen for its tactical advantages suddenly became a maze of craters, trenches, and earthen walls. In 30 seconds, the humans had completely changed the battlefield to suit their needs. What had been open ground perfect for our heavy weapons was now broken terrain that favored small mobile fighters. How did they do that? Gasped Private Nextel, peering out from the crater we had dived into for cover. Our explosives expert, Dorth Kicks, analyzed the blast patterns with professional interest. Sir, this required months of preparation. They had to survey the soil composition, calculate charge placement depths, and coordinate the timing perfectly. This entire area was prepared as a battlefield long before we arrived. The terrifying implication was clear. The humans had known we were coming and had prepared accordingly. But our intelligence report said this was a surprise attack. How could they have known? Before we could process this information fully, the humans demonstrated another aspect of their warfare that violated our understanding of military tactics. They began using their own civilians as weapons. A human child, no more than 10 years old by their aging standards, appeared at the edge of a crater about 50 meters away. She was carrying what appeared to be a small package and looked directly at our position with curious eyes. "Don't shoot," ordered Sergeant Vaxtel. "It's just a youngster." But this wasn't just a child wandering into a battlefield. She threw the package with surprising accuracy, landing it right in the center of our defensive position. The package exploded with tremendous force, filling our crater with choking smoke that burned our respiratory systems and clouded our thermal vision. While we were coughing and struggling to see, adult humans moved into attack positions around us. But they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they waited for the smoke to clear so we could see them clearly. There were 12 humans ranging from teenagers to elderly adults. None wore military uniforms. They carried a mixture of improvised and primitive weapons. And they were all smiling. "Good morning," called one of them, an elderly female with gray hair. "I'm Margaret, and I'll be your combat instructor today. I hope you're ready to learn." Our training taught us that enemies don't introduce themselves in the middle of battles. They don't smile or act friendly while pointing weapons at you. This behavior was so far outside our military experience that we didn't know how to respond. "Lesson 1, announced Margaret, raising her weapon. "Human combat tactics prioritize psychological warfare over brute force. Your emotional state is now more important than your equipment." She fired a single shot that struck the ground directly between Sergeant Vaxtel's feet. The precision was incredible, but the intent was clearly not to kill. She was demonstrating that she could have hit him if she wanted to. "Lesson 2, called a younger human male. "We use the environment as a weapon, observe." He threw something small into the crater with us. It looked harmless, but when it hit the ground, it released a gas that made our armor's environmental systems shut down in emergency mode. Suddenly, we were breathing the planet's atmosphere directly, and it was filled with irritating chemicals that made our eyes water and our breathing difficult. "Local plant pollen, concentrated and weaponized," explained the human cheerfully. "Completely harmless to us, quite unpleasant for you." A teenage human female raised her hand like she was in a classroom. "Can I show them lesson 3? "Of course, Sarah," Margaret replied. Sarah pointed to our heavy weapons specialist, Grexamar, who was struggling with his plasma cannon in the cramped crater. "Your weapons are designed for open battlefield engagements. In close quarters, they become disadvantages." To demonstrate, she threw a metal object that hit Grexamar's cannon barrel. The object was magnetic and stuck to the weapon. When Grexmar tried to fire, the magnetic interference caused the plasma containment field to collapse. Instead of firing a controlled energy blast, the cannon discharged randomly, creating a small explosion that damaged the weapon and injured Grexmar's hands. "Lesson 4, announced an elderly human male. "We've been fighting wars longer than your species has existed. We know every trick, and we've invented new ones you haven't thought of yet." He held up a device that looked like a small metal box. When he activated it, all of our electronic equipment began malfunctioning. Our armor's power systems fluctuated. Our weapons targeting systems displayed random information, and our communication devices produced only static. Electromagnetic pulse generator, he explained. Built from spare parts in my garage. Quite effective against electronics that aren't properly shielded. By now, half of our force was effectively blind, deaf, and defenseless. Our advanced technology had been neutralized by farmers using improvised devices built from civilian materials. But the worst lesson was still coming. Final lesson, Margaret announced, and her smile disappeared. We haven't actually been trying to kill you. This has been a demonstration, a teaching exercise. We wanted you to understand what you're facing before we get serious. She gestured, and more humans appeared. Not 12, not 20, but hundreds. They emerged from hiding places we hadn't detected, from underground tunnels we hadn't known existed, from concealed positions that our sensors had somehow missed. Every human carried weapons, but these weren't the improvised devices we had faced so far. These were military-grade firearms, explosives, and equipment that looked more advanced than our own technology. And every single human was looking at us with the same calm, patient expression. You see, Margaret continued, what you've experienced so far was our children's education program. We teach our young ones about warfare using live exercises. You've been fighting our students, not our soldiers. An adolescent human raised his hand. Ms. Margaret, did we pass the test? Excellent work, class, she replied. You've successfully demonstrated all basic defensive principles. Now please return to your families while the adults handle the rest of this situation. The younger humans waved goodbye to us and walked away from the battlefield like they were leaving school after a normal day. Some of them were laughing and talking about our reactions to their attacks. Now then, Margaret said, turning back to us, you've seen what our children can do. You've learned that our farmers and teachers are quite capable of defending themselves, but you insisted on staying. So now you'll meet our actual military personnel. A new voice spoke from behind us. Good morning. I'm Colonel Martinez, United Earth Defense Forces. I understand you'd like to discuss terms of surrender. We turned to see a human in military uniform. He was smaller than any of us, probably weighed less than half what a Vorthak warrior weighs and was carrying only a simple sidearm. But something about his presence made every one of my fellow soldiers take a step backward. I don't think you understand, Sergeant Vaxtel said, trying to regain some authority. We are elite Vorthak warriors. We don't surrender to inferior species. Colonel Martinez smiled, and that smile was more terrifying than any weapon we had faced. Oh, I understand perfectly. You're here to conquer Earth. You believe your technology and training make you superior to humans. You think this is going to be easy? He paused and looked at each of us individually. You're about to learn why that's the last mistake you'll ever make. The real war was about to begin. Colonel Martinez didn't immediately attack us. Instead, he did something that confused and terrified us more than any weapon could have. He offered us refreshments. You've been fighting for hours in our atmosphere, he said calmly. Your breathing systems are obviously struggling with our environmental conditions. Would you like some water? Perhaps something to eat? It's important to stay hydrated during combat operations. This was not how warfare was supposed to work. Enemies don't offer hospitality in the middle of battle. They don't show concern for your well-being while you're trying to kill them. The psychological effect was devastating. How do you maintain combat aggression against someone who's offering you food? Sergeant Vaxtel tried to maintain military discipline. We don't need anything from you, human. We demand you surrender your settlement and acknowledge Vorthak authority over this world. Colonel Martinez nodded thoughtfully, as if this was a reasonable business proposal. I see, you want us to surrender. Let me ask you something. How many of your people have died since you landed on our planet? 12 soldiers, admitted the sergeant reluctantly. And how many humans have you killed? The silence stretched uncomfortably. We had fired thousands of rounds, launched dozens of plasma charges, and fought desperately for hours, but we hadn't actually killed a single human. None, Sergeant Vaxtel finally admitted. Interesting, Colonel Martinez said. So in a battle between elite alien warriors and human farmers, the farmers are winning 12-0. Does that suggest anything to you about the relative combat effectiveness of our species? Before we could respond, he continued. Let me show you something that might help you understand your situation. He activated a small device, and a holographic display appeared in the air between us. It showed our orbital fleet, still stationed around Earth's moon, apparently safe and secure. Your ships, Colonel Martinez said casually. Quite impressive. Massive firepower, advanced shields, Sophisticated targeting systems. I'm sure you feel very confident having them up there. The display zoomed in on our flagship, showing it in perfect detail. Everything looked normal. Our ships were maintaining proper formation and appeared undamaged. Now watch this, the colonel said. The display switched to a different view, showing the same ships from another angle. But in this view, each of our massive warships was surrounded by tiny objects that were attached to their hulls like parasites. There were hundreds of them on each ship. What are those? Demanded Sergeant Vaxtell. Explosive charges, Colonel Martinez replied cheerfully. While you've been down here learning about ground combat, our space forces have been teaching your fleet about human ingenuity. Those tiny ships that attacked you earlier, they weren't trying to destroy your vessels. They were planting presence. He touched another control, and the display showed a close-up view of one of the attached devices. It was small, elegant, and absolutely covered with warning symbols in multiple languages. Each charge is powerful enough to breach your hull and create catastrophic decompression. They're positioned at critical structural points and power conduits. We can detonate them individually or all at once, depending on our mood. The implications hit us like a physical blow. Our entire fleet was essentially being held hostage by devices we hadn't even detected. But that's impossible, protested our technical specialist. Our sensors would have detected any approaching objects. Our defensive systems would have automatically engaged them. Colonel Martinez smiled. Would they? Are you sure about that? Tell me, what's the smallest object your defensive systems are programmed to engage? Any projectile or vessel larger than 2 meters. The specialist replied automatically. Ah, and what if the object is smaller than 2 meters? What if it's only 1 meter, or half a meter, or small enough to fit in someone's pocket? The horrible realization began to dawn on us. Human space technology wasn't inferior to ours. It was different. They had built tiny, intelligent devices that were below our detection and engagement thresholds. While we had been designing massive warships, they had been perfecting miniaturization. Your military doctrine assumes that effective weapons must be large and powerful, Colonel Martinez explained. Humans learned long ago that the most effective weapons are often the smallest ones. A single bullet can kill the largest creature. A small virus can destroy an entire ecosystem. A tiny device in the right place can cripple a massive starship. He gestured to the holographic display. Your fleet is currently defenseless. We could destroy every ship you have with the press of a button, but we're not going to do that. Why not? Asked Sergeant Vaxtell suspiciously. Because killing you won't teach you anything. Humans prefer to educate our enemies rather than simply eliminate them. Dead aliens can't go home and tell their governments about human capabilities. Dead aliens can't warn their species to leave us alone. This was perhaps the most disturbing thing we had heard yet. These humans weren't trying to win a war. They were trying to send a message. They wanted us to survive so we could report back about their abilities. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Colonel Martinez continued. First, you're going to contact your fleet and order them to withdraw to a safe distance. Then you're going to contact your government and explain that Earth is not a suitable target for invasion. Finally, you're going to go home and never come back. And if we refuse, demanded the sergeant. The colonel's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Then you'll get to see what human warfare looks like when we stop being polite. As if summoned by his words, more humans appeared around our position. These weren't farmers or teachers or elderly civilians. These were soldiers, and they moved with a fluid, deadly grace that made our own military training look clumsy by comparison. Let me introduce you to some friends of mine, Colonel Martinez said. Sergeant Chen is our specialist in close-quarters combat. She's killed more enemies with her bare hands than most soldiers kill with weapons. Corporal Johnson is our explosives expert. He can turn anything into a bomb, including things you wouldn't think could explode. Private Williams is our sniper. She once killed an enemy commander from 12 kilometers away in a thunderstorm. Each human he introduced nodded politely at us, like we were being introduced at a social gathering rather than a battlefield. But their eyes held the cold calculation of professional killers. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez specializes in psychological warfare. He can drive enemies insane without ever firing a shot. Lieutenant Kim is our technology specialist. She can hack any computer system ever built and turn your own equipment against you. Captain Thompson leads our Special Operations Unit. His team can infiltrate any facility, eliminate any target, and disappear without leaving evidence they were ever there. The list continued, and each introduction was more terrifying than the last. These humans didn't just fight wars. They had turned warfare into a science, with specialists for every conceivable situation. But the most important person I want you to meet, Colonel Martinez said, is Dr. Sarah Chen, our xenobiologist. A small human female stepped forward. She looked completely harmless, even fragile by our standards. She was carrying what appeared to be scientific equipment rather than weapons. Dr. Chen has been studying your biology since you landed, the colonel explained. She's identified 17 different ways to kill your species using materials found in any human household. She's also developed 12 different biological agents that would be fatal to your people but harmless to humans. Dr. Chen smiled pleasantly and spoke in a soft, gentle voice. I'm particularly excited about Agent Number 7. It would cause your respiratory system to shut down slowly over several hours. Very painful, but it would give you time to say goodbye to your families. The casual way she discussed our deaths was more terrifying than any threat or weapon. This human could wipe out our entire species, and she talked about it like an interesting academic problem. The point, Colonel Martinez said, is that you're not just outgunned. You're outthought, outplanned, and outmatched in every conceivable way. We know more about your biology than you know about ours. We know more about your technology than you know about ours. We know more about your military tactics than you know about ours. He paused to let this sink in, and we've been preparing for this encounter since we first detected your ships approaching our system. Every minute you've been here, we've been learning more about you while you've learned nothing useful about us. So I'll ask again, he concluded. Would you like to surrender now? Or would you prefer to see what happens when humans stop playing games? The choice was obvious, but admitting defeat to an inferior species would destroy our honor and end our military careers. We were trapped between certain death and certain disgrace. That's when we learned the most terrifying thing about human warfare. They had anticipated this exact psychological trap and had prepared a solution for it too. Colonel Martinez seemed to read our thoughts with disturbing accuracy. You're thinking that surrender would dishonor you and destroy your careers. You're weighing the disgrace of defeat against the certainty of death. This is exactly the psychological trap that most military minds fall into when facing overwhelming odds. He gestured to Dr. Chen, who activated another device. The holographic display changed to show detailed psychological profiles of each member of our unit, complete with personal information about our families, military records, and even our childhood fears. We've been monitoring your communications, analyzing your behavior patterns, and studying your cultural values since you entered our system, the colonel explained. We know that Vorthak honor culture makes surrender extremely difficult. We also know that your military promotion system punishes failure severely, so we've prepared an alternative. What kind of alternative? Asked Sergeant Vaxtel cautiously. You're going to help us test our new weapon systems, Colonel Martinez replied. Voluntary participation in human military exercises. You'll provide valuable data about alien combat capabilities, and in return, you'll return to your fleet as heroes who gathered crucial intelligence about human defenses. This was not what any of us had expected. You want us to help you improve your weapons? Think about it logically, the colonel said. Your government needs to know what they're facing if they ever consider attacking Earth again. Better information will help them make better decisions. We're offering you the chance to gather that information legitimately, rather than trying to steal it through combat. Dr. Chen stepped forward with her scientific equipment. We're particularly interested in how your physiology responds to various environmental stressors. Non-lethal testing, of course. You'll experience discomfort, but you'll survive to report your findings. The offer was both brilliant and terrifying. The humans were turning our military pride against us, offering us a way to save face while simultaneously gathering intelligence about our weaknesses. What exactly would these tests involve? Asked our medic Korthlek. Various scenarios, Colonel Martinez replied. Urban warfare simulations, extreme environment survival, technological adaptation challenges. You'll be fighting against human soldiers and equipment under controlled conditions. Think of it as professional military education. And if we refuse? The colonel shrugged. Then you'll die here, and your fleet will die in orbit, and your government will never know what happened to you. They'll probably send more invasion forces, and we'll have to kill them too. Eventually, we might get annoyed enough to visit your homeworlds and explain our position more directly. The casual threat of interstellar retaliation sent chills through our entire unit. These humans weren't just defending their planet. They were threatening to take the war to our territory if we forced them to. We accept, Sergeant Vaxtel said quickly. We'll participate in your tests. Excellent, Colonel Martinez replied. Let's begin with something simple. Urban combat simulation. The humans led us to what appeared to be an abandoned section of their settlement. Buildings lined both sides of a central street, with multiple levels and countless windows and doorways. It looked like perfect terrain for the kind of close-quarters fighting that Vorthak soldiers excelled at. The scenario is simple, explained Sergeant Chen, the close-quarters combat specialist. You'll advance through this urban area and attempt to reach the building at the far end. We'll be defending. You have your standard equipment and ammunition. We'll be using non-lethal substitutes, but the tactical principles are identical. This seemed reasonable. Urban warfare was one of our strongest specialties. Our power armor and energy weapons were designed for fighting in close quarters against multiple enemies. We had trained extensively for exactly this type of engagement. Are there any special rules? Asked Sergeant Vaxtel. Just one, Sergeant Chen replied with a smile. Try not to get too frustrated when you lose. The confidence in her voice was irritating, but we had been underestimating these humans all day. We formed up in standard urban assault formation and began our advance. The first sign that something was wrong came when we entered the first building. Our scanners showed human heat signatures throughout the structure, but when we breached the rooms, they were empty. The humans were somehow masking their locations or moving faster than our sensors could track. They're using the building's infrastructure against us, reported our technical specialist. Air ducts, maintenance tunnels, spaces between walls. They're treating the entire structure like a three-dimensional maze. While we were trying to understand the building's layout, the humans began their counterattack. But instead of fighting us directly, they started modifying the environment around us. Doors slammed shut, trapping individual soldiers in separate rooms. Lights went out, plunging sections of the building into darkness that favored the humans' natural vision. Strange sounds echoed through the walls, making it impossible to distinguish real threats from distractions. They're not just defending the building, realized Private Nextel. They're controlling it. The entire structure is a weapon. Through the building's communication system, Sergeant Chen's voice reached us. Lesson 1. Humans don't just fight in urban environments. We make urban environments fight for us. Every building on Earth can be turned into a fortress, a trap, or a weapon, depending on our needs. To demonstrate this point, the floor beneath Private Korthvin suddenly collapsed, dropping him into a lower level where he was immediately surrounded by waiting humans. He wasn't injured, but he was effectively captured and removed from the exercise. Lesson 2. Human urban combat doctrine assumes that the enemy will be stronger and better equipped than we are. So we don't fight fair. We change the rules of engagement to favor our advantages. Water began flooding into our section of the building. Not enough to drown us, but enough to slow our movement and interfere with our equipment. At the same time, the temperature started rising rapidly, forcing our armor's cooling systems to work at maximum capacity. Lesson 3. Humans have been fighting in cities for thousands of years. We know how to use every system, every utility, every structural element as a tactical advantage. The building's electrical system began producing random power surges that interfered with our weapons and communications. The plumbing system started releasing irritating chemicals that made our eyes water and our breathing difficult. Even the building's structural elements became hazards as walls shifted and floors tilted in response to hidden mechanisms. "This is impossible," gasped Sergeant Vaxtel. "How can they control an entire building with such precision?" "Preparation and technology," came Sergeant Chen's voice. "We spent weeks modifying this structure for combat scenarios. Every system is networked, every room is monitored, every surface can be controlled remotely. Welcome to 21st century urban warfare." By the time we reached the central area of the building, we had lost half our unit to various traps and diversions. Those of us who remained were exhausted, disoriented, and running low on ammunition. That's when the humans revealed the most disturbing aspect of their urban combat doctrine. The building was full of civilians, not armed civilians, like the farmers we had fought earlier, but actual non-combatants. Children, elderly individuals, disabled persons, people who clearly had no military training or capabilities. They were going about their daily lives as if a military exercise wasn't happening around them. "What are they doing here?" demanded Sergeant Vaxtel. "Living," replied Sergeant Chen, appearing from a hidden position. This isn't just a training facility. It's a real human community. These people actually live and work here. The implications were staggering. Human military doctrine didn't require clearing civilians from combat zones. Instead, they had trained their entire population to coexist. With military operations, humans don't separate military and civilian activities the way other species do, explained Sergeant Chen. Our civilians are part of our defense strategy. They provide intelligence, logistics support, and camouflage for military operations, and they continue their normal lives regardless of external threats. A human child walked past us carrying schoolbooks, nodded politely, and continued to what was apparently a classroom. An elderly human sat in a chair reading while explosions and weapons fire echoed around him. A group of humans was having a meal together at a table set up in what should have been a combat zone. "This is madness," whispered Private Nextel. "How can they function normally in the middle of a war?" "Practice," Sergeant Chen replied. "Humans have been living with warfare for our entire evolutionary history. We don't stop living just because someone is trying to kill us. We adapt, we continue, and we incorporate the threat into our daily routine." The psychological effect was devastating. How do you fight an enemy whose civilians refuse to be intimidated? How do you conquer a population that treats invasion like a minor inconvenience? "Final lesson," announced Sergeant Chen. "Human urban combat isn't about controlling buildings or territory. It's about controlling the population's will to resist. And as you can see, our will to resist is absolutely unbreakable." After our humiliating defeat in the urban combat exercise, Colonel Martinez gathered our surviving unit for what he called advanced tactical education. We had lost more than half our soldiers to various capture scenarios, and those of us who remained were exhausted, demoralized, and beginning to question everything we thought we knew about warfare. "Your performance was exactly what we expected," the colonel said, reviewing data on his portable device. "Vorthak military doctrine emphasizes direct confrontation, superior firepower, and technological advantages. These are excellent strategies when fighting enemies who follow similar principles." He looked up at us with what might have been sympathy. "Unfortunately for you, humans abandoned those principles about 3,000 years ago. We learned that survival requires adaptation, and adaptation requires abandoning preconceptions about how warfare should work." Dr. Chen approached with new equipment. "For your next educational experience, we're going to demonstrate human defensive psychology. You'll be attempting to capture and hold a strategic position while we attempt to retake it." This sounded more promising. Defensive operations were a Vorthak specialty. Our heavy armor and powerful weapons were designed for holding positions against superior numbers. If we could establish a defensive perimeter, we might finally demonstrate some competence. The humans led us to a hilltop position overlooking the agricultural valley where we had first landed. There was a concrete structure that appeared to be some kind of communications facility, surrounded by clear fields of fire in all directions. It was an ideal defensive position. "Your objective is to hold this facility for 1 hour," explained Colonel Martinez. "We'll be attempting to dislodge you using standard human assault tactics. You have full access to your remaining equipment and ammunition." "What about reinforcements?" asked Sergeant Vaxtel. "None available," the colonel replied. "You'll be defending with current personnel only." We had 6 soldiers remaining from our original force of 200. The humans were offering us a defensive position against unknown numbers of attackers. For the first time since landing on Earth, the tactical situation seemed to favor our strengths. We established defensive positions around the facility, set up overlapping fields of fire, and prepared for the human assault. Our remaining heavy weapons specialist positioned his plasma cannon to cover the most likely approach routes. Our technical specialist activated jamming equipment to interfere with human communications. Our medic prepared treatment stations for expected casualties. "Remember," Sergeant Vaxtel reminded us, "humans are small and fragile. Our weapons have superior range and power. If we can force them to attack across open ground, we can destroy them before they reach our positions." For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. Our scanners detected no movement in the surrounding area. No vehicles approached the hill. No aircraft appeared in the sky. The humans seemed to have vanished completely. "Where are they?" wondered Private Nextel, scanning the horizon with his rifle's targeting system. "Probably preparing their attack," suggested our technical specialist. Human tactics emphasize careful planning over rapid assault. At exactly 21 minutes into the exercise, our weapons stopped working, not all at once but systematically, starting with the most powerful systems and working down to individual rifles. Each weapon simply became unresponsive, displaying error messages in languages we didn't recognize. Technical malfunction, reported our specialist, frantically trying to diagnose the problem. All weapon systems are showing software conflicts. It's like they're rejecting our ammunition. Before we could solve this problem, our armor began malfunctioning in similar ways. Power systems fluctuated, environmental controls shut down, and communication systems produced nothing but static. Within minutes, we were essentially defenseless. How is this possible? Demanded Sergeant Vaxtel. The answer came from speakers hidden around the facility. Colonel Martinez's voice surrounded us from all directions. Lesson 1. Humans have been studying your technology since you entered our system. We know how your equipment works better than you do. A new voice joined the conversation. Lieutenant Kim, Technology Specialist. Your weapons and armor use standardized software protocols across all Vorthak military equipment. Very efficient for maintenance and logistics. Also very vulnerable to systematic hacking. We didn't physically attack your equipment, explained another voice. We simply updated your software with new parameters. Your weapons now recognize human positions as friendly targets and refuse to fire on us. Your armor now considers Earth's atmosphere toxic and is shut down to protect you from contamination. This was warfare beyond anything we had imagined. The humans had turned our own equipment against us without ever getting close enough to touch it. Lesson 2, continued Colonel Martinez. Human defensive doctrine doesn't rely on holding fixed positions. We defend by controlling the battlefield conditions that make positions valuable or worthless. To demonstrate this principle, the ground around our facility began to change. What had been solid earth became soft and unstable, making movement difficult and causing our heavy equipment to sink. The clear fields of fire we had relied on were obscured by rapidly growing plants that seemed to appear from nowhere. Automated agricultural systems, explained Dr. Chen's voice. The entire valley is equipped with rapid growth plant cultivation technology. We can reshape the terrain's vegetation in minutes rather than months. Within half an hour, our ideal defensive position had become a tactical nightmare. We couldn't see approaching enemies, couldn't move effectively, and couldn't use our weapons even if we could see targets. Lesson 3, announced a new voice. Humans don't attack defended positions. We eliminate the reasons why positions need to be defended. The communications facility we were supposed to protect suddenly exploded, not from external attack but from internal charges that the humans had apparently placed long before we arrived. The entire structure collapsed in a controlled demolition that left nothing worth defending. The facility was empty anyway, explained Colonel Martinez. We removed all valuable equipment hours ago. You've been defending an empty shell while the real communications equipment was relocated to a secure facility you don't know about. But our mission was to hold this position, protested Sergeant Vaxtel. Your mission was to learn about human warfare, the colonel corrected. You've just learned that humans don't fight for symbolic objectives. We fight for practical advantages. If holding a position provides no benefit, we eliminate the position rather than waste resources defending it. By now, we were sitting defenseless in the ruins of our objective, surrounded by terrain that favored our enemies. Equipped with useless weapons and malfunctioning armor, we had been completely outmaneuvered without the humans firing a single shot. Final lesson, Colonel Martinez announced, and this time his voice came from directly behind us. We turned to see him standing 10 meters away, completely exposed and apparently unarmed. Beside him stood the same group of human soldiers we had met earlier, but now they were wearing our equipment. Human adaptive warfare, he explained. While you were focused on defending this position, we captured your landing zone, seized your remaining equipment, and studied your technology in detail. We now have full access to Vorthak weapons, armor, and communication systems. The humans were carrying our own plasma rifles, wearing modified versions of our power armor, and using our communication devices to coordinate their activities. But more disturbing than the theft of our equipment was how quickly they had learned to use it. Your technology is quite impressive, commented Sergeant Chen, adjusting a Vorthak helmet to fit her smaller head, much more advanced than our current military equipment. We're particularly interested in the power armor design, very useful for hostile environment operations. You can't just steal our equipment, protested Private Nextel. We didn't steal it, Lieutenant Kim replied. We captured it in legitimate military operations. According to your own military codes, equipment abandoned on a battlefield becomes available for enemy salvage. But we didn't abandon anything, didn't you? Colonel Martinez asked. When you landed on our planet, you left your dropships unguarded. When you advanced into the settlement, you left your landing zone undefended. When you accepted our invitation to these exercises, you assumed your equipment would remain secure. He gestured to encompass our entire situation. You've been thinking like conquerors rather than soldiers. Conquerors assume they control the battlefield and can dictate terms of engagement. Soldiers assume the enemy is intelligent, adaptive, and constantly looking for advantages. Human warfare is based on the assumption that our enemies are smarter, stronger, and better equipped than we are, Dr. Chen added. So we compensate by being more creative, more flexible, and more willing to break conventional rules. The devastating realization hit us that the humans had been controlling every aspect of our experience since we landed on their planet. Every engagement, every tactical decision, every moment of apparent choice had been carefully orchestrated to teach us about their capabilities while gathering intelligence about ours. The question now, Colonel Martinez said, is what you do with this education. You can return to your fleet with accurate information about human capabilities, or you